sit and just stare at the fucking wall. Get up, my show's on.
Every year, thousands of new motion pictures are made. But even today, with myriad streaming, cable, and internet sources, the average viewer can only hope to be aware of a fraction of those titles. Each Obscurity report brings you a title that we believe deserves a far wider audience.
Welcome back to the Obscurity Report. The panel today, Sam.
The path to hell is paved with good intentions.
And Gravel. Mike.
Hey, what's up? Good to be back. This show is was supposed to take place months ago. I'm finally glad that we're able to do this. This is awesome.
Maybe we'll tell that story. And Dan.
What's up, guys? How's it going?
So yeah, this is the show on Visited by Voices where we try and spotlight a film that falls outside of the gaze of the normies and even most of the genre community, in hopes that if not this film, you search out something else that's off the beaten track. And yeah, this was supposed to be originally, I believe, the October show. And scheduling just started really ramping up for a lot of people. But also, I think a lot of people were kind of intimidated by this movie and finding a way to talk about it rationally. Tonight, we are talking about a film called Nenjam, Marappathillai, or The Heart Never Forgets. Although you'll find a couple different translations of that title online is still referring to the same film. Normally, I start this by asking people if they were familiar with the film at all. I think this could be an easy one to go around the table on. Sam?
Of course not. When am I ever familiar with a movie you give us?
Dan?
I was not. At first, I thought I'd heard of a title, believe it or not, called this, but it's some other popular Indian film in the 60s that had nothing to do with it. So, no, I was completely unfamiliar with this.
Mike?
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
So, I just have a theater near me that plays Indian movies, and anytime they play anything genre, I just go. And here's the thing, like, those listings don't tell you what these movies are about. They're like just the titles, the stars, the director, sometimes the composer of the music, and that's it. There's no description of what the movie's about, because they assume, since it's such an insular audience, that if you're interested, you know. So for us, you know, dumb Jersey boys who just like foreign entertainment, we take a lot of gambles. And so I went to see this not knowing anything other than it was referred to as, quote, a horror musical. Now, musical for an Indian film does not necessarily mean that's the main thing about it. I think this film qualifies in its own way, though, as legitimately a musical, more than most Indian films. This is a Tamil film, so it's from the South. It is not a Bollywood film. However, it has more Bollywood influences than many of the genre films we've discussed, like Game Over or Dar at the Mall. So before we get into initial impressions, what I would like is for each of you to give me in one sentence what this movie is about.
I literally did that when we opened the show. I did that. I have already submitted my answer.
Dan, what is The Heart Never Forgets about?
My God, in one sentence, it's everything. How do I get like 7 genres into one sentence? Man, I don't think I can. The drama is touching. The action's thrilling, and the comedy's funny, which I'm sure we'll get into all of that. But I can't put this in one sentence. I failed.
My attempt would be love conquers all.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of along that lines that that love and purity of heart will overcome any darkness type of thing. Even it may not end the way you expect it to or hope it will, but at the end it will prevail. It was, yeah, and like Dan said, it's like a family drama. It's a situation comedy. It's a musical, and then it devolves into like a paranormal horror film at the end with a happy resolution, I guess. I mean, it is. It's all over the place. It's just you don't know what's gonna. That's part of it to me. That's part of its strength and also part of its weakness. And another problem I have always is that I'm not familiar with you know the Indian way of life or the way things are done in India. And there's a lot of satire in this movie that just went over my head because I don't understand the references, right? So there's probably a lot of comedy that didn't land with me because I don't know what they're sending up. I just noticed a crazy change in tone and just go with it, right? It's like, hey, whatever. It's an Indian movie. What'd you expect? You know, sit there and watch it, and I I liked it. I do have a couple complaints about it, but I won't throw that out there right now. But yeah, it's so all over the place. One sentence will not do it justice, but that's the best I can do.
Okay, so now in a single sentence, everyone tell us what Halloween Kills is about. As a
Making
direct
money.
comparison.
I thought we were
Um,
done with this.
a guy in a mask kills really stupid people.
Why do you have to ruin such a perfect evening, Lauren? Bring it
I
on.
No. My point really is why we're spotlighting this film, because I agree with you. It's not a perfect film, but what it is a wild piece of entertainment that is impossible to come out of the Hollywood system. There's
Yeah.
no way.
No
I
way.
mean,
Yeah.
zero chance. This film actually kind of makes Natural Born Killers look kind of streamlined and passive.
A little bit. I didn't feel like it was quite that all over the place, though.
Really?
Yeah, no, I was able to follow along pretty well. The first part of it, we're setting up the course of events, getting to know everybody, establishing characters, and it is very much a family drama for probably that first hour. And then once oh man, how many spoilers are we going to get into here?
So my feelings are that we can be pretty open about spoilers, only because I don't think that's going to affect how when people see the film, how it affects them. I don't think what happens is quite the surprise as much as in this film how things happen.
True.
Well, it was all over the place though, in the way of it makes you look in one direction, but it's coming from another direction. Like it sets up at the beginning that one person's going to be the evil overlord, but then that switches toward the end, and we find out who the
Yeah.
real villain is. Yeah, and then you got all the, a lot of Indian films have a lot of religious aspects. It doesn't bother me at all. I wish we could be more open about that kind of stuff in our country, but at least they can talk about their differences. It almost comes down to at the end, like one religion versus another, which like the bad guy is of one belief, and then the victim early in the film who comes back to get some revenge is of another persuasion, right? It was really,
Yeah.
I don't know, I found it to be interesting, and I liked how they set up one person to kind of be the overlord victim, and then we find out the person playing weak is actually the one everybody's afraid of.
Yeah.
Now I didn't understand. They set up the this weird shit for me. It's like he had those Cheech and Chong like concert fantasies where his family's like forced to watch him play rock star on stage. I didn't know if that was like in his head he was doing that, but he makes an effort throughout the entire film to make sure that everybody knows how much his shoes cost, how much his car cost, how much his clothes cost, and all these things that are of status. But yet in his rock and roll fantasies, he's playing a Squire. Now, there's nothing wrong with Squire guitars, right? But
it's an entry level
the model
guitar.
he was playing was a couple $100, but this is a guy that wears $5,000 shoes and
Mhm.
He's
half a
also
million dollar car. You would think in his fantasy he would have more of an ornate, elaborate instrument to play. I don't know I don't know why that caught me. I saw the headstock and I'm like, Squire, really? This guy?
he's
I
also
mean, this
playing to a very small crowd, and it's just the people that are closest to him. It's like, why not a packed arena? And I feel
Well-
like that kind of reflects his insecurities. But
Well-
you can tell he's insecure from the fact that he's always bragging about how much everything costs. Also, that he spends a good portion of when he's introduced just speaking English, just like
and he gets
wording
shunned
that
for it.
to
He
establish
gets
his
shunned
status.
for it quite often, which I thought was
Yeah.
funny. Don't do
Yeah.
that.
Indian films always seem to have a rags to riches element to them. My experience with Indian film is mostly horror, a little bit of action, comedy, but for the most part, horror. And there's always a rags to riches element. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting in this, and I know it's a theme with the director's other films like Kadal Kandin, was Christianity. Now, I probably haven't seen enough to know if that's a theme, but that seems a little bit unusual. That was, Mary, not hard to figure out the religious aspects to the story.
Oh,
But
there's this. It's not even subtle that the baby may be Jesus.
yeah, no, it is. I would love to read the script to this because on paper, like, okay, you're gonna go from a family drama to a rape revenge story, and while maintaining this dark comedic tone. I, I don't know, reading it, if I could ever imagine it working. And then you have this massive martial arts supernatural battle at the end.
With intentionally janky special effects. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, I've noticed when I've pushed Indian films for other people, one of the big complaints, too long. Now, this is still 2.5 hours, but I think because it shifts, I think, pretty seamlessly throughout the genres, it never felt felt tired to me. I thought it was perfectly paced. And it hits on everything it tries to do. This actually made my top 10 for the year because the villains are detestable. And yet they were still able to make me laugh deep into the
Like
movie, which
when they're leaving the
you know,
police station, they're singing that like Disney-like song about how they
got
made the
away with it
cops
all.
believe
Yeah.
they're live. And it was
Yeah.
just like, but where did that come from? That was just like this slapstick comedic uh, music that moment in the middle of a film when they're being questioned about the rape and murder of a woman.
Yeah.
And they're like celebrating the fact that the cops bought their lie because their boss is so influential. And I like the turn of events we find out about him, more about him later on, versus what they set up. I guess I could just go ahead and spoil it. But
Yeah.
as far as the length goes, that was a problem for me, only because I I felt like there could have been about 20 minutes trimmed randomly here and there. It was just a little long in some spaces. Like the family drama part kind of drug on a little long before we got to the middle and then the ending. Uh, I don't know what you would cut. Like I said, my ignorance of satire in India, I wouldn't know where to begin. But I just felt as a viewer, about halfway through, I paused it just to see how much was left. And I was like, really? It just felt a little long and a little awkwardly paced, but that was really my only complaint. Everything hit. Everything was great. I like the changing. You got this guy that's married to the boss's daughter. And we think, oh, here we go. He's the puppy dog, right? He's got to do everything to make his wife happy, or well, she'll go to the father, who's his boss, and make his life a living hell. He might lose his job. So his entire life depends on his wife being happy with him, right? Like they set her up to be the mean person. She's the reason why these women keep quitting. And then we find out that she has a drug habit, and he's been controlling her this whole time by supplying her with drugs. And he actually killed somebody to get his job, and her father's actually afraid of him. So that
She's
was
so
like a
into
weird little.
you.
So it's like, yeah, the kid being Jesus with the the babysitter being, the representation of God, and him being the representation of the devil, fighting over the soul of the child at the
Mhm.
That
end,
was awesome.
with some really interesting, fight scenes and souls leaving bodies and entering other bodies and this happening. And it was crazy, but it was enjoyable.
The way
Yeah.
they shot the assault too, with the crucifixion played over the assault, was
Ugh.
really interesting. Disturbing, like without really showing anything. And I thought the wife's, I'm trying to remember the exact line, but where she slaps him was like, "But you did the right thing." I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god!"
Oh, what
Yeah.
cracked me up about hers is she would read him the riot act, and at the end, "But I love you."
Yeah,
that was just like, what? You basically just called him the worst piece of shit human being that's ever lived on the earth, but I love you.
Because he killed her. So yeah. Oops.
Yeah, he was.
So she had
She
to
was
realize
more.
that he was actually the one in control, and she could only go so far without backing down.
Yeah, she was upset about the rape and murder not because of the violence, but because he'd been with someone else.
Also,
Well,
what
like
would
she
your
told
friend
him, if
say?
you're going to have a sexual emergency, I told you to keep it out of the house.
Yeah,
yeah, it was just appearances more than
Yeah, it was all
anything,
about
and
appearances with her. I mean, how dare you bring that on our family and our house and our father and my father and the business, and you've jeopardized everything with your stupidity, but I love you. It's hilarious.
I know we're not making it sound very funny, but it really is. When the
so-
slide starts floating outside and they're just going on like it's just a normal thing. The
Yeah.
servants are all dismembered. It's like, oh,
That
let's
was
watch.
amazing. That totally
the
got
guy
me.
who gets hit by the truck 14 times.
Yeah.
There's no way that's not like a text, something like a Max Fleischer cartoon type thing. It's just, it's so over the top and but still so violent. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that talking about this film, the reason that I'm not worried about spoilers is that you can't really get your head around it while you're watching it, and it knows you can't. It's like toying with its audience, and I think that's kind of fascinating.
Mhm.
Well, that's like the sign of a good movie for me, like The Witch. Like I haven't watched this movie since when I was preparing
Yeah.
for the original show. I've seen it once, but it's still in my mind. I could still go through scenes. I've only seen it once, so it definitely stuck with me, which is the sign of effective filmmaking.
So I read an interview with the director Selva Garhed, and he tells a fascinating story about the origin of this movie. They were looking. He's a very well regarded filmmaker in India. If considered on the arts, like we consider him an art house director in America, but he has had tremendous commercial success as well. And he was looking for that next project, and he just didn't want to do the same thing. And so he was speaking with the producer, and the producer was throwing genres at him. And he threw the word horror at him, and he said, "Well, the problem with that is I've never seen a horror film." And he goes, "Well, okay, I guess we'll do something else." He said, "No, wait a second. What if I make a horror film without ever having seen a horror film? I'll only ask my friends to describe horror movies to me, but I'll never watch one before I make one." So the origin of this film is from a person who comes from a completely blank slate, except for secondhand knowledge of what a horror film would be. And it's fascinating because I think you end up with a film that, in its ignorance of the genre, doesn't get trapped by the genre. It can do anything. It's not worried about the fake parameters that too often you see in especially Hollywood films. You're like, well, we got to get the jump scare, or we got to get the Blumhouse mirror scare. We got to get it
The
in there.
trope checklist.
Yeah, whereas this guy had no idea that list existed, and we see what he came up with.
That was definitely creative. I'll give it that 100%. I thought you were going to say they were listing off all the genres, and he said yes, to all of them, because it kind of is. You got your family drama, almost situation comedy, musical, horror. It's everything and anything all in one.
I feel
I
like
don't know if
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say I don't know if an average moviegoer could actually make it through the film. I don't. It's a challenging watch for people that are used to things being formulated for consumption, right? This is not that.
Yeah, the musical portion actually, I mean, with a couple of examples, like honestly, "My Wife's Out of Town" is the best song in this whole movie. Is that I love that whole cut scene. But I didn't think that the musical pieces were very over the top, which is saying something because our villain Ramsey, he is himself over the top, but he's also like he's kind of like an Indian Patrick Bateman. Like if Patrick Bateman had gone on to have a family, this is what would have happened, 100%. And damn, I forgot where I was going with this. I would just
Don't bother me while Susudio's playing. God damn it! That's where you're going.
I need that to exist now. I just need somehow those two pieces have to cross over. But no, Dan, what you were saying about the rape scene, it's like with the scenes of Jesus being crucified.
Yeah,
that was tasteful, but it was also very disturbing.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, India. I know they can't really show that, so
yeah.
In a way, it was more effective. It's not something that I could see an American director doing. And in fact, I think this was a hell of an experiment. A guy that knew nothing at all about a genre. Now we need to get him to do the next Halloween movie. I would love to see that. I'm only half joking. I'd love to see it.
I mean, that would be great, but I'd love to see American directors do that over here. But all right, I gotta throw shade. But if a director did that over here, do y'all think the horror community would have their panties in a knot about it because they're not real horror fans?
If they took if this director took on one of the big franchise pieces, he'd be run out of town by the genre fans in general, I think, because those titles become too precious for their own worth, which is why they've outlived their usefulness, honestly. And that's not just in the genre. You could go to the long-running science fiction or fantasy, series, and the same thing's true there. But ironically, if a studio would get behind someone that wanted to do something as crazy as this on the big screen today, it might jumpstart a new generation of like vital American films. Because you forget that it was films like, Dog Day Afternoon and The Wild Bunch. Big swings at the time, like go for broke, do something that really hasn't been put on screen before. That kind of opened up cinema in the 70s, and I think we could have that with the right thing. I think in a way, Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers, which I think is the closest comparison of any film I can think of to this. Can you imagine really as I don't know. I think that film did change cinema. And maybe another big swing like this in America is what we need, but it just can't be a number 8 of anything.
No.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a standalone movie, I wonder if that would be received better.
I like to think that maybe like A24, Neon, some of these companies are slowly doing that. Because you mentioned Natural Born Killers, I think the mid 90s, late 90s, a lot of really good films that were kind of, I wish the turn had kept up a little bit, because there was also a lot of really stupid Hollywood blockbusters that started coming along in the early 2000s, Mummy Returns and what have you, really bad examples. But I've always felt that the more people see, I mean, just like a food comparison, the more food you try, your palate opens up. And I actually think of all the Indian films we've done on here that this would be the most popular, because I don't think they're going to feel the length. Maybe that first hour, some people, have to get past it, but I think it's amazing. And when you get to the end, I think a lot of horror fans will be satisfied. I think it satisfies the splatter fans. The humor is hilarious. I don't want to give everything away, but towards the end, it's just like there's so much going on. It's insane. One of the best finales I think I've seen all year. And this is one you won't forget. I might have had trouble. I watch a lot of movies. I watched just about every horror movie that came out last year. As crazy as that sounds, I had a checklist and I got to almost everything. Um, there are films I watch, and 2 weeks later, I struggle to remember certain things. Basically, anything Bloomhouse that will just like all bleed together. This has been months. I didn't get to rewatch it again. I had planned to, but I didn't get the time. And I remember this vividly.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's just one film, but I do think you can change cinema because right now we need it, at least as far as our blockbusters are just really, really bad, generally speaking. So I don't know. I hope people will give this one a try. I promise you won't forget it. And I promise you will be entertained.
And don't forget to check out Zombie Ready because I
Yeah.
forgot I left that off my list of best films of last year, and it definitely belongs on that list. It's
Mhm.
incredible, and actually, that's still my favorite of all the films we've watched. That's still, slightly. I mean, Darth the Maul was good. This one was really good, but something about Zombie Ready, I don't know. Just maybe it was quicker paced, or I don't know what it was. This one though, that first hour is hard to get through, but it's worth it.
Mhm.
I think maybe in that first hour they could have cut a little bit here and there. Some things kind of drug to get to the middle section where the comedy kicks in before we get to the horror. Just a little too much in the beginning. It did seem like it drug a little bit, and that would be a problem for people that are used to you know faster paced, get to the point type of movies.
Do you think it's
Mhm.
because we're conditioned to go for the 90-minute mark? Because this, 2 hours, it's asking a lot, and if you're not really up to that kind of to if you're not used to the 2-hour movie, like if you're used to the quick, 90 minutes in and out, and you know where the jump scares are, and you know how it's all going to wrap up, we're conditioned to a lot of those movies in horror as it is. This is, it has a different pacing altogether, and I think Dora at the Mall was also longer, was also about 2 hours, if I'm not mistaken, and yeah, that also felt long. But I think the problem is more with me because like my brain is used to being like, all right, well, here's first act, second act, third act. Okay, we're going home. Okay. It's like, what? I got another half an hour. So I think for me, it's more of a me problem. But I got really invested in all of the characters in that first half. And I still really like the second half as well. But man, I was like totally involved in everything that was happening and all the little tiny little dramas. And Mariam is a really great protagonist.
Yes, yes.
Just
All
really
the
feel.
actors were great in this
Oh
movie. I
yeah.
mean, they really pulled it off.
Length is something I complain about a lot in Hollywood Hollywood films right now. I mean, the last James Bond film bored me to tears. And it's about the exact same length as this, and or something like Fast and the Furious. Those movies are literally 95% action at this point, and I'm bored to tears. I don't know if I'm in the minority, but this was different. I didn't feel like we were just like nothing was happening because
Yeah.
everything was happening.
Even when it was like just very subtle, things were happening all the time. And
Yeah.
especially the guy that plays Ramsey, like even when he's doing the most mundane of tasks, like going to work, you really kind of can't take your eye off of him because
He's
he's
bad,
like
yeah.
he's really connecting so much, very, very much like the gal that played Mariam.
I will tell you that I recently watched a film called Commando 3. I haven't seen the other two Commando films from India. And
Yeah.
I was looking for big dumb action because no one does big dumb action like India, believe me. They kind of it's kind of what happens if the Rambo films had never stopped and got more outrageous every year is where they're at now. But Commando 3 was surprisingly subtle. But the actor who plays Ramsey is in the film as basically the controller. He's the guy in front of all the big screens talking to all the people at computers, right?
Mhm.
But after this film, it was like poison. I could not see him from this. So every time he started screaming, I'm grinning ear to ear, and it's for no good reason because he's very somberly and very calculated, being like the terrorists are all around the cities. We have to formulate some kind of a plan. And I'm just like, this is the best thing ever, just because this dude's in it.
The switch is
Like
going to
a
get
guy in
flipped
a
in.
devil mask to appear over his right shoulder and talking like a Peanuts character. It's because that happens in this movie.
I'm gonna have to find Commando 3 now.
Right.
You know what? It's a good flick. It's just not what I was expecting it to be. The ending is surprisingly poignant, as opposed to a big dumb action scene, which they set it up for a big dumb action scene, but you get something else. But no, so I went to the theater to see this, and if you can imagine seeing this in a theater with an audience being like the only European American sitting, which is not even a really good descriptor of me, but we'll go with it. The audience was really into it, but they were also just as baffled. So I think, Mike, like you're saying, you weren't sure if you got all the nuance. I'm pretty sure they didn't either. I'm pretty sure this is just gonzo entertainment for everyone who sits down to watch it. And going in not knowing anything, I was blown through the back of the theater by what I had seen. And at first I came out saying, I either really hated that or really loved it. I'm not. I knew it wasn't a middle ground film. There was no way. I have a cat walking on me. There was no way that it was going to be a film that I forgot again immediately after watching, like you said, Dan. But it was later that night when I started just laughing at the outrageousness of what I'd seen it after watching it. And then when I was trying to describe it a couple days later to a friend and say, well, it's a film kind of about, it's kind of the Jesus story told through a broken television set that won't stay on a single channel. And he's looking at me like, that's not a real movie. You're making this shit up. And that's when I knew that I needed to revisit it, and I couldn't wait for it to find a home to be viewed, at home. And unfortunately, there isn't a physical release of the film, despite what I might hold up. It's just available streaming, though it is widely available streaming. But I think that's kind of the stumbling block for this movie, is that it's too weird for any service to really push it as a hey, this is this must-see foreign horror film. Instead, it's going to easily get buried. So I wanted to make sure it was an Obscurity Report flick, just because I see too many ways for this movie to get buried and forgotten.
It already got buried for a while because it was filmed in it was supposed to come out in 2016, I think.
Yeah, 5-year wait for release. Yeah, it's crazy because there is coverage of this movie, but it's all out of India. Yeah. And that's the issue. I don't quite understand why mainstream horror outlets, I mean, maybe somebody did, but I sure as hell don't see anything on this movie. It just doesn't exist. I would say that's probably the only American podcast that has anything about it. And I don't get it. It is special. It is different. And I don't know what it is about India. It's a massive country. We have there's a large Indian population near me. There is an audience out here for this, and I don't understand why they're not tapping into it.
I know some people don't realize that Christianity is a thing in India. It's a kind of because I actually worked with a guy named Prem, which is, I thought that was kind of an odd name at first, but come to find out, it's like Mike.
John.
You know what I mean? It's pretty normal,
Yeah.
in India. But his dad was a Lutheran minister in India, and he grew up a pastor's kid. So I had a lot of good conversations with him about the differences, and he was a really cool guy. I mean, I kind of lost touch with him over the years, but to see a movie that this seemed more Catholic flavored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that's fine. Whatever. But yeah, it was really interesting to see the juxtaposition of the two religions, because obviously Ramses kind of falls on the more traditional gods and goddesses of other Indian religions. and then you have this babysitter who's basically a nun because she was raised in an orphanage and she only took this job to make money to support the orphanage. And so yeah, it was
Well, there's
a lot of
also
weird, and possibly God even made an appearance as the old man at the stand.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
took over for it. So it was like there's so many things going on. It's like,
yeah,
but
well,
the
Satan.
Indian culture is the part that I didn't. I got all the Christian references, but it was the other stuff that they satirized that I don't know anything about. So I can't enjoy a satirization of something I don't know about. It's like
Well,
that's satire, but I don't know of what.
there's definitely an issue of because Miriam comes from definitely a Tamil speaking rural community, and the rich family is obviously much more from a northern, more insular, rich. Because the country is very, very classist still, even though class is officially
Mhm.
outlawed as a part of, social structure. It still exists in every form, and I mean the the employees of the house are basically living like slaves out in a
Mhm.
shack behind the house. And when they're originally Miriam arrives there, she's told she's going to live with these guys, and she refuses. And they give her like the worst room in the house. There's a lot there about like what the society is all about, how it continues to subjugate people, not just because of where they're from and languages, but also based on religion.
Mhm.
The fact that they keep trying to get rid of the cross and it keeps not working.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think there is a lot there, and I mean I'm no expert on Indian culture. I'm starting to see enough Indian films that I'm getting a little bit better about it, but uh, I think that the ability to do that, to make a statement about a society inside a piece of art, and it doesn't come off as them preaching to you, but rather than examining it through this lens of absurdist horror is it's so much healthier than what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you mean release a sequel to a dead franchise and then yell at each other about why you should like it or shouldn't like it?
Right.
I mean, I'm totally over it. I just am. After the Halloween Kills thing, I really I don't care. It's like if you guys want to go see these movies and you think they're good and that's what you want to support, you have my blessing. But just because I disagree with you, it doesn't make you better than me or me better than you. It just means I disagree. The same thing I saw starting to happen with Scream 5,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
there are people putting things out on Twitter about how dare you not like this movie, and it's like, okay, I'm done, I'm out, I don't care. It's Scream 5, right? How good did you expect it to be? I pretty much I like the first film, and that's about it. But I've had a problem with every single Scream film. The third act has fallen apart for me every single time. Why should I expect anything different? Should I
Yeah.
pretend to like it just to be a good guy? I'm not interested. I own the first four Scream films. I never watch them. Why do I own them? I don't know. I guess I was in a collector's moment. Like, I got to get them all, like they're Pokemon
Reference.
or something.
You might need a
Uh,
reference point at for something. Who knows?
but yeah,
It
so I don't. American horror for the most part is just regurgitated crap and something to fight over, and I'm not into it. So I'd rather watch stuff like this. It does make you think. I'm still thinking about it months after I saw it. What I saw was crazy and entertaining. I don't understand everything I saw, but I know I liked it. Although it could have been, for me, edited a little bit for the quicker pace to get to some of the stuff. It's a little long. The first act is a little long for me, but that's my only complaint, really.
But at some point you're going to get a handgun held to a 1-year-old's head, so it's all good.
yeah.
That's a big
It,
1 year
Yeah,
old.
the evil
yeah.
guy is
Well,
going to
I don't
protect
know.
his
I've
son
never
from
had.
the
I have
righteous
no
woman
idea.
by putting a gun to his head.
Right.
I think it's interesting this year. My top 10, there was only one American film, uh, which not super unusual, but I think foreign film in general is going to be really important going forward because just politically right now everything's just such a mess here, and I could see certain things getting worse. I hope not. But I I think at some point we will get that Indian film that breaks through because look at Korean stuff right now. Americans are over the moon for just Korean anything. It's just got to be that movie that hits and maybe they embrace the culture more because I've watched a lot of Korean films. I understand that culture pretty well. And something I don't know. I'm really into Indonesian film right now, Turkish film, lots of great stuff, and the culture is a little less recognizable, maybe. But the more you watch, the more you understand what's going on. You understand the people, and I think it will happen. It's just a question of when. I don't know if it's meant to be this movie. Although, again, if you're listening to this podcast, I promise you if nothing else, you've not seen this before. You've not
Yeah.
seen it 20 times. And
You'll
I
be
didn't hate
entertained.
Scream 5. It was a Scream movie. It actually I thought it was the most entertaining of the sequels, but it's Scream 5. Like that's all it is. Look at this. And I know I'm going to be in the minority for now, but I hope in the future people will look at something like this versus a Scream 5 and realize, wow, I still got the creative kills and effects and all this in a much more interesting movie. So
I would have preferred to
It
watch
seems-
this in a theater versus Scream 5.
yeah,
It seemed like
Well, I
it was a
did.
more meaningful movie too.
I hate you,
mean,
Lauren.
Um, so before we start to just give our final evaluation of the film, I just wanted to point out that it's funny you mentioned Turkey, for instance, and that's still pretty hard for regular American audiences to get their head around. But it seems like the countries we went to war with at some point in our history, we tend to embrace their art afterwards. And I'm wondering if it's kind of, and I don't mean this in a horrible like blue versus red way, but it's kind of colonial, right? Like we understand the cultures that we've been at conflict with at some point, and maybe had the upper hand with at some point. So Korea, right, is more relatable to us. Certainly, Japan was
that
embraced
would be
by
the
the whole.
first one I would think of. Yeah.
Yeah, even Russia with the Cold War, like Russian cinema, like the Day Watch, Night Watch, that stuff. There's certainly a horror audience that will embrace. Sputnik was released
Yeah.
what 2 years ago, a year ago.
yeah, Sputnik. It's been a slower embrace of Russian film, but I have slowly started to notice getting more traction.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting that the countries that we have don't have those connections in the past through our history, and maybe it wouldn't have to normally be war, but it tends to be what it looks like.
Yeah.
We tend to embrace faster. Maybe we need to go to war with India so we can appreciate their art.
Can we just leave poor India alone so they can just give us more good horror movies?
They actually
that's-
like us,
Yeah, that might be a
Let's keep
better
it-
idea.
Yeah.
Keep it that way. Keep it friendly.
Food.
Yeah.
Oh, the food is
We had
amazing.
enough war. War doesn't solve anything. Just
Yeah,
kills people.
well, listen, it looks like we're going to really be embracing Russian and Chinese films shortly.
Yeah.
Studied the wrong kanji. Fuck.
So, guys, as always, however you choose, whatever your rating scale you want to use, how would you rate The Heart Will Never Forget? Sam?
It's very high. This is probably my favorite of the Indian movies that we've watched. And, probably this one, then Zombie Ready, then Darth Maul. So, but I'm going to kind of let it still settle, and I need to go back and rewatch Zombie Ready and just kind of I need my ranking set up, but it's definitely high up there. I would say at least like an 8 out of 10. And it's so involving, and it's weird, and it's sweet, and it's also sincere, and it's also very disturbing and unsettling. And then there's also all of the weird gonzo horror shit in the second half. It has, it's like a buffet. You can get a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and nothing feels like it's off kilter. It's beautifully shot, and I think it was just executed amazingly well. and it was a very emotionally involving watch. I'm gonna bump it up to 9 out of 10 for that.
Wow. All right. Dan, where would you put it?
I would I'd give it a perfect 5 on our rating scale. Nothing they didn't fail at anything, the 20 genres that they tackle all at once. Everything hit. What was supposed to be touching was touching. Uh, even when it got way over the top, I mean, I was glued to my seat, just in a way that you don't get that often. I'm genuinely impressed, and I'd like to see the director's other films. I hope there's other genres he's never like explored or watched, so we can, I don't know, reinvent the romantic comedy or something.
The
I'll check.
Western.
Yeah, the Western. There. Oh, I'd love to see him tackle a Western. Wow.
Mike.
Pretty much everything Sam said is right on. Both, everybody's saying the same things I'm going to say about this movie, except for I don't remember what I rated Zombie Ready, but that one is still just a slight margin above this, right? Just because did have a problem with the pacing, and I felt like it could have been tightened up a little bit in some areas, whereas Zombie Ready felt more like, it was a machine that was moving at a good speed, and you had to keep up. This kind of felt like a drug a little bit in certain spots, but other than that, it's right up there with Zombie Ready, just a little under it. Uh, yeah, out of all the movies I watched last year, Zombie Ready, this movie, of course, Dracula eating a cheeseburger. These are things I remember more than some of the other films that I watched. I mean, I remember more about this movie than I did Mortal Kombat. It's just,
Mm.
and what I said about the community fighting with each other with Halloween and that, uh, Spider-Man: No Way Home really surprised me because it was better than it had any right to be,
It
and
was.
I actually enjoyed it. I really did. And I felt that was fan service done right. You're going to bring back Andrew Garfield, you're going to bring back Tobey Maguire, and you're going to give their characters time and an arc that felt somewhat meaningful to their existence in a superhero movie that I'm not used to getting that from. And I was
Mhm.
thinking, if the producers of the Halloween franchise would watch this movie, maybe they could crap out a good Halloween film. Because the fan service you're giving us in those movies is not good.
No.
It's horrible. Spider-Man at least did that right. No matter what you want to say about another superhero film, what? After so many bad ones, though, when a good one pops up, I have to go, "Hey, that one was actually pretty good." Uh, and Star Wars too. It's like why couldn't we get that with the legacy characters of Star Wars, where they had an arc and they were respectfully written and they had a final adventure before they handed it off to the new people, right? Well, why can't we have that? But we don't have that, and then they blame the fans for not liking it when they didn't give us something that was likable. I mean, that's kind of where we've been for the last, I don't know how many years. It's getting tiring. Uh, I did not have that problem with this film at all. I felt that, although it was a bit all over, it's kind of like trying to drive on ice. Your car's all over the place. You don't know, am I going in that ditch or am I going to get in a head-on collision over there? I don't know, but it's going to be fun, right?
We
That,
need
that
S.J. Surya as the Green Goblin now.
And one
That
thing I really about
yeah.
the beginning, no matter how much I complain about it being a little slow or maybe a little boring, I love the transition of the character because we're introduced to Ramses. He's the put upon lapdog of his wife, who's the daughter of the owner of the company. And we see him kissing up to everybody throughout the movie, trying to get respect. And then when the lens is actually turned around where we can see what's actually going on, they're actually afraid of him. He's actually the big bad guy of the movie, but we're kind of not led to believe that at first, and it was very effective how they did that. And his descent into evil was quite satisfying. I mean, here he is. He's fighting for control of the soul of his son, and his answer is to kill his son to keep him away from the babysitter. Because no, she's trying to influence our son, and I can't have that. So he's going to kill everybody to prevent that. Uh, it, so just to see the depths that he would, and then how he, how she dies and takes over the wife's body, and then they have like this kung fu battle between the wife and the husband, and spirits are knocked out of bodies, and he comes back in, and the babysitter's in the wife's body, and now she's got the kid, and he's out of the picture because he's dead, and there's nothing he can do about it. I mean, that was just she spent a good portion of the film as a ghost, unable to right the wrong, and how the tide was turned on him, to where now he's going to have to face an eternity of being ignored by everybody because of what he's done throughout the film. I thought it was great. That was awesome. That was a great ending. Definitely didn't see it coming. I mean, we're talking about this Disney-esque villain song when they're leaving the police station about how they bought the lie, and the wife goes out of town, and they're all sitting around drinking and telling stories, and then we kind of start to see the little bit of the turn in the husband about that point. But yeah, it
Oh.
was definitely worth checking out. I agree with everything you guys said about it. Definitely, I don't know what to rate. I forgot what I rated Zombie Ready, but I would put it just maybe a half a star underneath Zombie Ready.
For myself, this is a solid B plus. And here's the thing: it's a B plus overall, right? Because I do think it swings at every fence it can find, and there's levels of success. It never fails, never. But there's things that are just absolutely amazing, and then there's things that are, well, okay, that was cool. I wish it had worked a little bit better. But the courage to even try one of these things, let alone the 7 each minute, like this thing tries experimental gags the way an airplane film tries to get as many jokes into a minute as it can. And it'll be a joke, it'll be something disturbing, it'll be something thought provoking, it'll be something profound. But it never slows down and lets you take it in. There's always another moment and 7 more gags. So it's a B plus as far as an overall film for me, but it is actually an A plus for just the sheer audacity to make something so dense and so creative and so brave. I don't use the word brave a lot to describe movies anymore, and that's sad because movies used to be nothing but brave. Look at everything released in 1975. Everything released in 1975. You'll find it's all brave to one level or another, and that would include everything right down to the live action Disney films at the time.
Yeah.
Whereas today, everything is extraordinarily safe. They don't want to offend any of the potential 4-quadrant audience.
Yeah.
This movie is the pill. It's the antidote to all that. It's the right Matrix pill as opposed to that thing that's in theaters now. I would really, really suggest to people who want something different, real different, like staggeringly different, to search this movie out and give it a chance. Now, some of you are going to hate it. I do think that's possible, but I think you'll hate it and still respect it for simply being so full force what it is and what it wants to be. Does it sometimes look like you're watching the Black Hole Sun video? Yeah, sure it does. but it also is the kind of movie that will leave you thinking about it and will leave the right kind of ghosts in your head. So while I think I agree with Mike, I think Zombie Ready overall is a film I prefer to this one. I would say it's a little bit unfair because their goals are so different. And how wonderful is that, right? Two films, couple years apart in release, although this was made much earlier, from pretty much the same region of the world, and they're so vastly different. It seems like when we go to the movies, to the multiplex anyway, in our own country, it's usually to see something that's very much like something we've seen before. So if people are wondering why have we featured so many Indian films, it's because there's something happening in India right now. There's also something happening in Turkey right now. There's something happening in Indonesia right now. There's something happening in South Korea. That one you're familiar with right now. There are hot spots, and I think India is a big one at the moment. I'm not saying everything that comes out of India in the genre is great. I'll be the first to tell you there's a lot of crap there too. But when they try to do something, it's not half-assed.
Mm-hmm.
So, Any final words, guys, before I rudely start loud music and credits?
It was delightful. Thank you for picking this out.
Yeah, and like you said, even though everybody will find something to like, even if it's 2.5 hours long, there might only be a 5-minute segment, but you'll be happy you watched it just because of that segment. I guarantee that there's so much stuff packed into this movie. Even if you don't like 90% of it, that 10% will that you do like will make you feel like, well, it was worth it. So don't let any of the things we've said about politics and religion and Indian lifestyle or whatever kind of, oh, well, I'm not interested in that. I'll give it a chance. I mean, it's definitely worth a watch. I do highly recommend dropping your guard and just letting it be what it is and enjoy it for what it is.
I would actually close with saying if somebody at Vinegar Syndrome or any boutique label out there right now, consider looking into this one, maybe putting it out. It will be one like something like that. Vinegar Syndrome puts it out, and then a ton of people that would never watch it otherwise will. And this is a good choice for that, like because I do think it will catch on and absolutely have a cult following.
And hey, it's a movie that you could have 6 different slipcovers with all different genres.
6 slips. There you go. 6 for 6 videos of Lauren tearing one.
But then being the biggest supporter of the film that's actually contained therein.
You have to promise not to tear it if they do it. I feel like this one will have to be the one that you keep on the shelf. All 6.
If they make it thick enough cardboard, I can't. So that's a challenge. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Check it out. I think this was one of the rare unanimous shows, whereas we're all probably saying that you need to check this out. So do it. It's not hard to find. Just Google it. You'll find your streaming options. Till then, have a great one.